Paul, good afternoon, everybody. David Rouse is my name, Multi-Unit Developments Advisor with the Housing Agency. You're very welcome to our webinar this afternoon on the launch of our new guidance document, Multi-Unit Developments, a Guide to Insurance. We have a packed agenda in what is a session that's slightly shorter than some previous webinars that we've hosted. We have an expert panel to discuss the webinar, and we hope that you enjoyed the session this afternoon. While people are logging on, we might do a little survey and get a sense of our audience here today. So we'd be very grateful if you could respond to the question you see on screen and let us know what sector or what niche of the OMC or MUD sector you are working in. Are you an OMC director? Are you a property management agent? Are you an insurance broker? Are you in the AHB or local authority sector? Maybe you're a homeowner, an owner occupier. Maybe you're a renter or a tenant. You could be a landlord or an investor in a multi-unit development. Maybe you're in the construction sector. You're a developer, an architect, engineer. I know we have members of the legal profession joining us today, and we may have some accountants or people in finance or people who maybe categorize themselves as other. But if you could give us a quick answer on that, that'd be great. And we'd be grateful for your input on that. And I'll run that poll for another couple of seconds. And just to get a sense, anyone who hasn't answered it would be grateful for your response. It'd be very helpful to us. So thank you very much indeed. I'll end that poll and I'll share the results, and you can get a sense of the audience here with us. So about a quarter of you are in the management agent section, about 14-15% are OMC directors. We have lots of people from the AHB and local authority sector, and insurance brokers joining us, and lawyers as well. So thank you very much indeed for answering that. So I'm going to share my screen again and go through a detailed agenda that we have for you. As I said, it's going to be a packed session. Thank you for completing the survey. I'm going to do a quick update on what's going on in the MUD sector. Then we'll do a brief introducer or explainer for the new guidance document, which is now available on our website. We'll have a panel discussion with our expert panelists. I'm very excited to have a really good panel with us this afternoon from the property management agent sector and from the insurance broker sector. We'll wrap it up right about 1 o'clock, 1:10 give or take. So we hope you'll be able to stick with us for the duration of the session. We have a chat function there available to you. Please let us know if you have any problems with sound or vision. My colleagues Graham Fryer and Vivian Pringle are here in the background to help you with that. We've received a number of questions ahead of time by email, and so we'll discuss those with our panel. Don't worry, the slides will be emailed out to you, not a problem with that, so you can relax and maybe look at a lot of the detail in your own time. And the session is being recorded for future use, so we expect to put it on our YouTube channel over the next number of days as well, for maybe a watch back for anyone who wants to do that. So thanks again for completing the survey. A quick update, and this is going to be a whistle-stop tour, a rapid-fire round, if you like, on what's going on in the MUD sector at the moment, covering company law, regulation, and maybe some of the environmental issues. But before I do that, quickly to touch on some of the CSO's numbers from the completion statistics issued last Thursday in relation to the apartment sector. There were nearly 12,000 apartments completed last year, which was up by 28% from 2022. 72% of all completions in the Dublin area, so all housing in the 4 Dublin local authority areas, 72% of those completions were apartments. 36% of the completions nationally were apartments, and 78% of all the national completions were actually in Dublin. So I have the link there for you on the CSO data. Interesting to see the completion statistics over the last 7 years. The orange or yellow line on the right is apartments, and you can see it coming very close to outpacing conventional housing. And just, I suppose, that's completions. This statistic here is in relation to planning permissions from the Climate Change Advisory Council, and you can see the grey line is the apartment planning permissions over the last period as well. So you can see that the completions are now tailing in with some of the permission lines as well. Company law, a quick update. You all know, or maybe you don't, that OMCs are entitled to hold their AGMs online under the COVID provisions, and that provision has been extended to the end of 2024 for those OMCs that require it, and it's expected that that'll be brought in on a permanent basis in updates to the Companies Act in due course. A quick ask from ourselves, we would ask you to help us identify OMCs when they're being registered with the Companies Office through the form B1 in relation to the annual return, and the form A1 in relation to new registrations. And you'll see in the red box there's a box to tick to identify OMCs, so we're trying to get a handle on that. Lots of detail on data protection guidance issued by the Data Protection Commission over the last number of months. Lots of material there in relation to OMCs and MUDs. You can read the detail yourself. They have case studies, 3 of which refer to apartments, CCTV, use of members' information, and other topics including disclosure of unpaid service charge members and the use of the members' register. So you can look at the detail on that in your own time when you look at the slides. A quick nugget of information is that the Court Service have a new debt recovery page on their website. Some very useful information in relation to understanding debt, how to make a debt claim, enforcement of debt judgments, etc. Really, really good plain English material for those of you in the service charge recovery space. So definitely worth a read there. The Energy Performance of Buildings Directive in the Green Agenda was amended and updated in recent weeks. Some of the targets and objectives are pretty stark in relation to decarbonisation, in particular in relation to residential building stock. So worth considering where we're going on that in the apartment and MUD sector, and worth highlighting some updates on the SCAI website in relation to supports for OMCs and MUDs. There's a good case study there in relation to the refitting of lighting in the Links estate in Portmarnock. So lots of detail there. You might want to look at it in your own time. We know that the residential retrofit loan scheme is coming in very soon, and that will apply to individual properties. But the challenge of retrofitting owners, management companies and multi-unit developments in terms of finance, governance, and bringing all the diverse owners of the estate together is one that is being addressed through research that we ourselves in the agency are doing with colleagues in the Department of Housing, Department of Energy and the SCAI. The issue of defects is obviously front and centre for a lot of stakeholders in the sector. You can read updates on the interim scheme for fire safety defects on our website. I've included the link there for you so you can look at that later on, and an update on the full scheme and the legislation is included there that the heads of bill are in preparation with the drafting sections. With regard to the Housing for All objectives, in relation to reform of OMCs, I've included some recent parliamentary question and Dáil debate responses from the Minister for Justice, where you can read the detail of what's going on there and an update for yourselves. And with regard to sinking funds, worth picking up on some work that the department and a group looking at approved housing bodies have done in relation to sinking funds. And I've included a link to the report there as well, and highlighting the importance of sinking funds for AHBs, and that's a thread that obviously comes through to the OMC and private sector as well. A reminder of all the resources on our website. Our FAQs have been updated. We have 6 specific training sessions for MUDs and 17 different webinars on lots of different topics that many of you have kindly attended over recent months and years. A reminder of our guidance for OMC directors, published in collaboration with our friends in Chartered Accountants Ireland. Our guide to engaging a property management agent is also on our website, as is a compilation of writing on issues in the sector from lots of different magazines and trade publications. Some upcoming webinars. So today we have a great session, and we have 3 more, hopefully equally valuable and informative sessions coming up for you. So dates for the diary: 28th of February, we'll have Maeve Hogan, the CEO of the Property Services Regulatory Authority, talking about OMCs and the interaction with regulation of property management agents. On the 13th of March, we'll hear about about recycling, waste management, segregation, and news and updates in that from our friends in WIRLA and the Irish Waste Management Association. And finally, in April, we'll hear from the Corporate Enforcement Authority on their role in the MUDS sector. You can contact us, mud@housingagency.ie, or keep an eye on our website for all those updates. So now a quick intro into the guide before we get to our panel discussion. You should have received a link to where you can access the guide in your reminder email for this session. You would have received it about an hour ago. I've included the link there on our website. I'm not going to go through this line by line. That's for yourselves to do and get the benefit of the guide in due course, but it runs to about 20 pages. We would say that it's important to note that the advice is general in nature, as indeed is the commentary that our colleagues and our panelists are going to give in the coming half an hour or so. So we're attempting to provide and bridge the gap in knowledge between OMC directors and stakeholders and maybe agents and brokers, but we're really at pains to point out that your property management agent, who should be licensed by the PSRA, is the expert in management agency and dealing with the operational matters in your estate. Your broker is the expert in insurance, and we would defer to their advice and guidance. But hopefully the material in the guide will give you signposts and bring you along in the journey of the important issue of taking out insurance for your block. Our panel is made up of experts from the Society of Chartered Surveyors Ireland, from the Institute of Professional Auctioneers and Valuers, and from Brokers Ireland, who were contributors to the guide, and we're very grateful to those three bodies for their assistance in developing the material. A quick overview of the contents. So we talk about, I suppose, the foundational aspects of insurance in OMCs, where their obligation comes from through the head lease, and some background in relation to insurance obligations and disclosures under the MUD Act. We talk about different types of insurance policies arising in MUDs, block insurance, common area content insurance, public liability, employer's liability, lift or engineering insurance, and directors and officers liability insurance. And we'd invite you to read the detail in your own time when you get a chance. We have some commentary then on other forms of insurance that are, I suppose, tangential or related to MUDs and OMCs and apartments. We talk about who does what in the sector, the role of brokers, the role of the agents, the role of the board, and what happens in relation to claims arising. We have some information on defective properties, and we have some further information as well. So lots of detail there. The material is supported by a very, very comprehensive glossary of terms, and we try to do our best to put those into plain English and de-jargonize some of the material. And finally, we have an appendix and an extract from part one of the PSRA letter of engagement, which outlines the typical insurance management services that an agent will provide under the contract. So that's a quick overview of the guide. We're delighted to be joined today by a fantastic panel of experts in this space. We're delighted that John Kennedy, the president of IPAV, is with us, and John has 20 years experience in the property sector, founder of Casey Kennedy Estate Agents, and he is a residential valuer and a graduate of TU Dublin and an engineer by profession. Aoife O'Sullivan is with us today. Aoife is the head of property management services with Smith Property Management, and Aoife chairs the residential committee of the SCSI. Again, Aoife has years of experience in the sector, a chartered property manager and a member of the SCSI and the UK's Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors and graduate of TU Dublin. And last but by no means least, Hazel Rock is head of insurance services for Brokers Ireland, and her experience in the insurance sector is with Irish Brokers Association and indeed, of course, Brokers Ireland. And Hazel holds an MSc and a BSc in management. So delighted to be joined by that this fantastic panel of experts. And I might open up the discussion briefly, Aoife, maybe by going to yourself and saying, you know, what do you feel is perhaps the most frequently arising issue in the for your stakeholders in the insurance space, and maybe, you know, how does the guide assist with what they're facing?
Thank you, David. I think from experience, the implication it's twofold from our stakeholders' perspective. So if you're a member of an OMC, it's your experience of claims and when you need to make a claim, most commonly for water ingress, it's being familiar around excesses and what's actually covered under your block policy. From an OMC or a director's perspective, really the focus is about minimising risk to the OMC, and does the OMC have adequate insurance in place in respect to the sums being insured under the block policy. I think the guide is quite good in terms of there's a couple of pages that reference, what's in your insurance policy or standard insurance policy. I think, if you flick through pages 14 and 16, it brings you through that. And again, in terms of insurance and risk minimization, there's some good content there around in pages 7 and 9 around that, and kind of give some steer on it. And I also find that the glossary of terms at the very back is quite useful and drills down into what is an excess, what's an insurable risk. And it gives good guidance around what these terms actually mean.
Brilliant. That's super. Thanks very much. And John, if I might open it up to yourself and to maybe to IPAV members, what parts of the guide strike you as perhaps some of the more prominent and helpful?
Yeah, no, I think the guide is very, very helpful. I think it's the insurance is probably one of the biggest costs that are kind of wrestled with for OMCs. Obviously, they have to pay it. From our members' perspective, they are negotiating, obviously looking for the best policy for the best price. The reality is that all of we're all aligned in regards. We want to have no claims. We want to mitigate anything happening, and therefore then go to the actual insurance broker and say, can you get us the best deal because we've had no claims? Because ultimately it's one of the biggest costs that members have to endure. And again, you need to make sure that you're fully covered, but you also then make sure that you're not, I suppose, claiming for small issues or because that'll drive cost up. So there's a massive cost as well in processing claims. The insurance don't want to actually have to deal with those costs. The agent, from our perspective, is having to deal with the costs as well. They have to I suppose, bridge that gap between the person who has incurred a water leak above them, the emotional part of that, then dealing with the actual repairs of that, dealing with the kind of anger then if it doesn't, if they feel that comes short of actually hitting their what they think they should have gotten from that, and then also coordinating between loss adjusters and loss assessors.
Brilliant, John. Thanks very much, and again, thanks indeed to IPAV for their contribution to the session. If I could throw it across, Hazel, from the insurance brokers' point of view, and I suppose maybe when your colleagues and your members are looking at the guidance, what would strike you as what would be an opportune time to refer to the guide?
Yeah, I suppose for stakeholders, not just insurance brokers, for all stakeholders that are incorporated and included within the guide, I suppose the guidance could be used throughout the insurance process, and that's quite an important point to make, in that it's not just when insurance is up, it's the renewal, it's anything that may come up midterm in terms of claims, or anything that may just so happen to come up throughout the course of the year during the insurance term. I suppose for OMC directors, they should reference the guide when arranging initially the insurance for their MUD, under their management. Also, for property owners who naturally are members of the OMC, paying insurance through their service charges, it's important for them to, consult the guidance to understand the payment process and the implications of such. I suppose the decision makers are clearly quite the directors of the OMC, so they should use the guidance for decisions on purchasing insurance, clearly understanding the needs, obtaining cost quotations and seeking that professional advice, because it is quite an undertaking, it's not just your standard home or whatever, it's very complex. So it's very important. And I think the guide is brilliant to it. I know Aoife alluded to it, that it's quite, it lays it out in good terms. There's a great glossary there, etc. So, but also from brokers' point of view, insurance brokers' point of view, is that the guide showcases, that they are there to be used. That is their bread and butter, their advice, their guidance, and their understanding of complex risks, and also opportunities and ways by which they can perhaps reduce insurance premiums, given, of course, a good track record of claims and whatnot, but also the risk minimization, etc. So all in all, annual review of the insurance needs. Like I say, it's not just a one-hit type of guide. When it comes up for renewal, it should be constantly referred to. And I think the guide brings you through that on a journey, so to speak, and can be used year on year.
Aoife, if I might throw it across to you on the timing and the timing issue, and maybe your members' experience of the renewals process. I think the guidance draws attention to, I suppose, early action on all fronts. Would that be your experience?
Early action in terms of within the parameters of renewing your insurance, that there's a certain time point that you really can't do much beforehand. But I think from observation, what as agents we're increasingly seeing is the question around what are the building sums being insured, and insurers asking that question in the run up to renewal or when the policy is going out to the market. So can directors of OMCs take early action? Yes, they can make sure or establish that they are covering the correct building sums insured well in advance of policy renewal, so that they've done a lot of that hard work before they get up to renewal time.
And John, maybe the same to yourself. How do you think in terms of timing? I suppose on Aoife has mentioned the renewals front in terms of taking action on claims.
Well, the sooner you have all the information gathered, the sooner you can submit it to, get a requote, with any risks that you have mitigated. So the sooner you can have that prepared and not leave it to the last moment, because if there's any queries, then the person who's raised that query is out from coding point of view. So yeah, it's how soon they'll get a quote before the day of cover comes up, I guess, is the answer to that.
And I might hone in on a couple of specific types of insurance that the guide covers. And Aoife, I might go back to you briefly on this one. The guide talks about, for example, public liability insurance, directors and officers insurance. These are kind of niche policies outside the broader block policy. How often do you see those coming up, and is it important to kind of draw attention to those?
I suppose certainly public liability would be standard from our experience in terms of block policy. That's to protect the OMC against third-party claims, and a critical component of the insurance for the OMC. Directors and officers liability, I'd certainly take the view that is critical for directors as well, just to protect themselves. I mean, they are officers of the company, and they need to minimize any exposure that they may have when making decisions on behalf of the membership. So directors and officers liability, I would consider, essential for any director, but it's not always put in place as standard. But again, going back to the public liability, that's absolutely critical for any OMC, that they protect themselves against outside claims.
And the guide also talks about, I had intended to refer to professional indemnity insurance rather than public liability insurance, of course, which is PL is, of course, within the terms of the standard block policy. But professional indemnity insurance as well is something that is required, I think, by the Property Services Regulatory Act of 2011. And John, I might come to you on that, and maybe Hazel might jump in after as well. Is there, the guide, refers to PII and in the context of months, but is.
And as you said yourself, there is a requirement there for that insurance. So if an agent did cause loss and wasn't able to afford to pay it, that the insurance obviously is there, to do that. So yeah, I think it's very rare that actually is claimed on. You know, it would be negligence or incompetence in regards of and causing financial loss. But yeah, I mean, anything that can be any insurance is good as long as, you know what I mean, it obviously services a need, which is that if there is a loss there, that it can cover that if it wasn't possible otherwise.
Hazel, just some of the other forms of insurance then that are mentioned, such as contents insurance, common area contents insurance, and then contents insurance for individual owners. It's not something that, you know, renters or owner occupiers always think about. What would Brokers Ireland sort of touch on if in considering those issues for apartments in particular?
Yeah, no, it's even just reading the guide, you know, it spells out kind of the areas whereby you wouldn't necessarily be thinking of, oh, that doesn't impact me. It's all through, you know, the one payment in terms of insurance. So I suppose, like, you know, the common areas is important because obviously it's legally responsible of the OMC to make sure that those are covered. Obviously, it comes down to a broker will be, you know, advising in terms of keeping, for common areas in particular, keeping them clear. So to mitigate any risks that may come across, you know, should the event of it, you know, hopefully not, obviously, of an issue that may come to be. So the report really does, like, and I will hold my hands up, I am new to the role, so I wasn't part of the team that put it together, my colleagues here, but it's certainly something that you know, it's definitely useful for them to take away. Obviously, as well, like risk minimization, should I say, is what brokers you know, can do for you. You go for it, so they will talk you through step-by-step guide in terms of how to reduce the risk. And you know, on page 11, it does showcase all the other forms of insurance that, as you rightly mentioned, may not have probably thought of. You know, you're obviously insured, it's your own home in the house or in the particular block, and that obviously, naturally enough, personal items that are a matter of each owner themselves. But there is aspects to it, you know, renters insurance is effectively dissimilar to the owner's content insurance and covering that, etc. And also just like an insurance broker is going to hone in on the fact if you are in a mixed developments, which the guide says itself, it's just to determine who is responsible for what, and actually just asking the questions. And that's what the insurance broker is good at, you know, the questions that you may not necessarily think of, they will certainly have that in the locker and be able to ask that, and in turn, you know, reduce your risk and potentially premium costs.
They had a couple. Sorry, John, go ahead.
Yeah, if I may come in just on a small point, in terms of risk mitigation and absolutely anything that can be done should be done. Something that's crept in that kind of was in the UK and it seems to be creeping in a little bit now is in periodic electrical certification, and that is now being asked for inside of the actual blocks, which is is an issue because some people don't allow somebody to cross that door.
Yes.
And if that was the case and that was to then become common practice, you could find blocks not being insured whatsoever if somebody is not willing to let somebody in. There's also a significant cost to the actual member having to fork out a couple of hundred up to 500 euros for a periodic certification. How often is that going to be required? You know, is every 5 years. That's, you know, significant extra costs now. You know, for landlords, you know, that's another cost that they may not want to bear as well. So again, you know, it's cost upon cost. So yeah,
it's the knock-on effect. And do you mind me asking, in terms of periodic certification, like in the UK, has that been in long, John? Is that relatively new practice?
It's no. Well, I mean, it's I suppose a way of making sure that the electrics are all perfectly, you know, and you know, certifying of that. You know, then do you do gas in regards? You know, it's cost on cost. Which is which is ramping up on the OMCs, and the agents are delivering that news. So we're very kind of, I suppose, worried that this would be something that would be sought inside of the OMCs. I don't think it really should be applied.
Okay, very good. That's an interesting new development. Thanks very much for that, John. Aoife, if I could just touch on some of the other types of insurance that are mentioned. So, for example, contractors. liability insurance. So when you have people coming on site, what's your experience of the attention that that gets? So if you've, if you've a third party builder coming in, or someone fitting cabling for CCTV or TV services, what should OMC directors or their agents be thinking about in that context?
Certainly, from an OMC perspective, any contractor or supplier doing any sort of work on within the common areas should be adequately insured and should be able to demonstrate that to the OMC. So they should be able to provide a copy of their own insurance policies, employers' liability, and indemnifications if that's what the OMC requires in terms of work. And it's important that each OMC talks to, outside of routine, the landscapers and the bin companies, if there's something unusual happening or there are larger scale project works happening, that they engage with their insurers as well, just to make sure that they're getting the best steer in terms of what they should be looking at from that individual supplier.
Brilliant. Good to touch on that. We had a couple of questions come in advance of the session. One in particular deals with the role of loss assessors as opposed to loss adjusters. And I don't know, John, if you were open to touching on that particular question, and I suppose there's a cost attached to the role of the loss assessor, and whether that's always the best route for people.
Yeah, no, it's I have mixed feelings in regards kind of on this. Typically they're looking for 10% fee on kind of whatever they can get. So obviously they're trying to drive it up as high as they can and cover absolutely everything that they can. Yeah, so I'm sure there's good loss assessors and bad loss assessors and fair loss assessors and unfair ones. It's too grey an area to know whether. I couldn't come down on side and saying whether I do or don't agree.
Fair enough.
In some cases they worked very well, and other cases it has caused more problems. So
yeah, open to Aoife or Hazel coming in on that one, or I can go to the next question equally. Aoife, did you want to touch on that?
Yeah, look, I suppose, the loss assessors primarily interested in protecting the insurance company and assessing the amount that the insurers will need to pay out on any given claim. For a member within an OMC or a homeowner, they may want to have their own loss adjuster who will act on their behalf. So I suppose it's important to remember who each is acting for. A loss assessor is looking to minimize the amount that the insurers will have to pay out. And Hazel, please correct me if I'm wrong on this. Whereas a loss adjuster will be looking to maximize the amount that a homeowner may receive in respect of damage or any one claim.
Also, I suppose it's hard to know. It is a bit of a grey area. There's just pros and cons to both sides of using, I suppose, a loss assessor. One of those would be obviously they have, a good understanding of the policy. They would be good in a dispute resolution where there's disagreements, with an insurance company over a claim. And it could potentially save time, legal costs, etc. So there is, aspects to it. Naturally enough, there's fees involved, everyone gets paid for, I'm not representing loss assessors, but I'm just trying to, balance an act here in terms of what they could do. They could provide efficiencies, managing the documentation, negotiations and the communications with the insurance companies, taking it out of your hand. But like Aoife says, it's, pulling one arm against another. So it's important just to kind of have an understanding and just knuckle down to what exactly it is you want from this particular claim process.
Good advice there, Hazel. Thank you very much. John, I might touch on the other question that came into us was in relation to, I think, broadly the issue of short-term lettings in apartments and maybe the impact that they potentially could have on the insurance policy. Have you experience of that, or how does that strike you?
Yeah, you're kind of alluding to kind of the likes of Airbnb or any of these kind of short-term kind of where the question is, are they registered in order to provide those services, and therefore more traffic going through if they are kind of in the corridors? Does that create more liability in terms of insurance? could the members say, well, yours is an Airbnb, therefore you should pay more? You know what I mean? Yeah, there's lots of questions on that, and this industry is, or this, sorry, sector is very, very new in our infancy in a lot of ways, in terms of, you know, having to deal with things that we've never had to deal with, and until they're actually kind of I suppose fought out in the courts, sometimes there's not going to be kind of a very clear path of how these are going to be dealt with in the future either. And that includes everything from unpaid kind of service charges and you know, to other issues that occur. But yeah, it's like I've two kind of again balanced kind of looking at it. I like Airbnb. I think it's a great service. I think, but at the same time, as it does have some challenges for OMCs in terms of, you know, that it does create a risk for them as well in that. And how do you square that peg? It's yeah. Tune in. I suppose we'll find out.
And I suppose, you know, we're speaking in generalities here. Each OMC and each set of directors should look at, you know, the terms of the insurance policy, whether maybe they're explicitly prohibited under the policy, or indeed the head lease, or if there's a planning permission issue as well. So there's actually a myriad of different things probably coming in on that front. So very complex, John, as you say there. We're coming up to about 10 past the hour, and I'm conscious of everyone's time and committed to keeping to the advertised time of today's session. So I might give a last opportunity to our panelists, starting with Aoife, to make some last comments. I know I know we had a chat earlier. The glossary was seen as a good tool.
I think it's a great guide, David, particularly for directors of OMCs. I suppose as agents, we have a wider exposure to insurance and brokers. Many directors of OMCs rely on their agents to give them information and guidance. So there is now an independent piece of guidance with good, clear reference points on the key touch points in the insurance process. And I suppose, you know, looking at that document, it's really giving good guidance around understanding what should be insured, claims, impact on policies, timely reporting, who's doing what, the broker versus the agent, what do these terms mean? I think it gives some great guidance around that for OMC directors and agents as well, and all the stakeholders involved in the sector.
And Hazel, maybe a last input from yourself, and indeed thanks again to Brokers Ireland for your availability today and contributions.
No, delighted to be here. Thanks, David. I'll just echo what Aoife said. Really, really good, clear guide. And it's an opportunity, I suppose, for our own members to share it with their clients, you know, so that they can, and I think the key thing is here, continue to communicate it, you know, that this is a guide. It can be a guide that can be used from our clients, but also then from Brokers Ireland's point of view, we will certainly be issuing and sharing the guide amongst our membership, just to, you know, keep the momentum going in terms of, you know, the clear messaging and key information that's included within.
Super, thanks, Hazel. We know from the stats at the start of the session, John, that apartment numbers are going only in one direction, and the number of MUDs and OMCs that your own members are dealing with. And again, I know thanks to your chief executive, Pat Davitt, who was otherwise detained today. So thanks, John, for your contribution. And any last comments from yourself on behalf of IPAV?
No, just that any these guides, I think, do serve to kind of educate, and I think that's the most important thing. You know, from our members' point of view, as I said, we're I suppose striving to reduce as much costs as we can for our OMCs. Working with the insurance agencies to try and reduce premiums would be a strategic goal, I think, for everybody. Because, you know, everybody wants, you know, the higher fee does not mean that they earn more from their point of view. I'm sure that they communicate, and the less claims that we have and the less hassle we have, you know, processing those, I think that would be a joint goal of all stakeholders.
Brilliant. Thanks very much indeed, John, and thanks again to Aoife on behalf of the Society, to Hazel on behalf of Brokers Ireland, and to John. A reminder of the upcoming sessions over the next number of months: 28th of February, 13th of March, and the 16th of April. You'll find details in due course on the news and events page of the housing agency website. I've included it there for you. Get in touch with us at mud@housingagency.ie for anything else about this session, but you will receive the slides over the coming days and a link to the recording. So I'll wrap it up there with thanks and Mila Buikas, to Aoife, to Hazel, to John. Thanks indeed to Vivian and to Graham in the background for keeping me on track and just about to time and with tech and everything else. So I hope you enjoy what is the penultimate day of January. Spring starts on Thursday, and thank you very much indeed, and have a good afternoon.
Brilliant. Thanks, David.
Thanks, David.